Welcome to another episode of People I Know Show. Curt Carstensen here, joined today in Crete, an island, a part of Greece, joined by Mariah Schumacher.
Hello. Hi.
We are here, or I am here, because of you, because of decisions you made a while ago, and decisions more recently brings us here right now. So that, among a few other things that I've learned about you so far on this trip, made me want to have you as a guest on the podcast. So, Mariah, in your perspective, why are we in Crete today?
Oof. We are in Crete today because I have been traveling for a while, and you know my dad, and my dad came to join me to travel for a little while, and I finally was able to come to Greece after thinking I would be here during the winter, and winter is now almost over, and I was finally able to come based on some visa things. And so when these visa things cleared up and I was able to come to Greece, my dad was like, okay, I'll come meet you in Greece, and then said, I'm going to bring a friend. His name's Curt. He's going to be joining us for this trip.
And till that moment, hearing my name, you had not heard that I existed.
No.
I might not have existed. We don't know for sure. You don't know for sure. I probably did, though. And the story for me probably goes a little bit different. Like, yes, your dad and I work together, and I think it's been several months since he told me there was a Minnesota Twins baseball game that I joined he and his parents at back in like July or August, and I think that fourth ticket was for you.
You were the person.
I was the person that went to that game because around that time you took off for Europe.
Yeah, I didn't know that, actually. I had been planning on leaving for this trip for many, many years since, long story, since like elementary school, middle school. And for a while I had September planned as my leave date. And then at some point in late winter, I was like, I don't need to wait any longer. I can leave whenever I want. I'm going to leave as soon as I can. And for me, that meant in 3 months, which was, July 14th. July 14th is the day that I left. And that was a few months sooner for everyone in my life that was kind of planning around me leaving in September. And so I said yes to these baseball tickets, and then had to say no because I will be out of the country. I didn't know you were the person that took them.
I was the person.
That's funny.
And perhaps if I wasn't able to or didn't go that day, who knows because that was the first time I think your dad and I ever hung out outside of our workplace.
Wow, that's so neat.
So if that doesn't happen, then maybe and I believe he'll be on a future episode of the podcast, and at that point, maybe we'll get to the bottom of this. I don't remember the initial conversation about him deciding that he was going to come see you. Yeah. Whether it was that first conversation where I interjected and said, I'll go too, or if that didn't happen, he makes it up and he would have invited me at some other point.
Yeah, you both like to travel, it seems.
Yeah.
And hit it off there with a few other things, it seemed.
Yeah, definitely. And that is, I guess, getting to my answer of why we're here, but still not because, so you had this plan, I'm sure, for Europe, at least roughly the places you wanted to go, and I'd imagine you can get into this, you'd meet people that would tell you about something, and there's opportunities through your online work opportunities, but ultimately, if I was just planning the trip for me, nothing against Greece has been great. Greece wasn't a place high in my list, but because it was your dad's trip
and this adventure,
and your trip, I was just, I'm going wherever. That's fine. I'll go to Greece. And then, so when the planning for Greece, and he and I will take off soon and go to some other places, when the planning for Greece was happening, because I was busy with other things somewhat, but mostly the Greece part wasn't my trip. I didn't really want to interfere with it. You all decide what you want to do.
Yeah, life trip.
And it was you that wanted to come to Crete specifically?
No, not at all.
Oh. What the hell are we doing here?
Really, I wanted to go somewhere warmer because I had just spent 3 months accidentally spent 3 months in Bulgaria, and it was the 3 coldest months to spend in Bulgaria. And so I wanted to go south, but I had to wait until I had to wait for my Schengen visa, which is this 90 days you can spend in most European Union countries. I had already spent about 90 days there during the summer, mostly in Italy, because I loved Italy way more than I thought I would. Because of that, I had to be out of that zone for 90 more days. And I ended up spending all of those 90 days in Bulgaria, finding so much love and beauty everywhere. But I was cold and I kept wanting to go as south as I could, and that meant Greece. And that meant Crete, which
Crete,
is why we're here.
Like the southernmost part, but it's really not any...
It's not that much warmer.
It's going to be nice tomorrow, I think. Tomorrow is
Yeah.
a future thing to anyone taking in this conversation. Tomorrow as well in the past. So it's going to be sunnier and like 55 for our final day here. But maybe for you, sunny and 55, you haven't experienced it much lately. I know I haven't, living in Minnesota.
So comparing it to Minnesota is the way that I have been doing it. But when I was in Bulgaria, the most recent place I was in Bulgaria before Sofia, the capital, I was working in Polski Trambesz, which is like this northern central part of Bulgaria. And it was like 64 degrees one day and sunny, like 3 weeks ago, which was great. I was outside and I was in the sun. And then about 4 days after that, a huge snow came, and it was my first experience of snow this winter, which is the first time maybe in my life that I only had one snow experience.
You almost had a non-snow winter.
Yes, and that was actually my goal. But I found myself missing the snow after a while. And what actually happened, a great love of mine was traveling with me, and still is. They're in that room over there.
And I hope they're not too loud. We're trying some different things here with my technology. I travel very lightly.
Yeah,
It's
it
working
makes
well, I
sense.
think.
I think so too. I'm not paying attention to them
Yeah.
at all. We were out walking the dogs. Our only work at this place was to care for the dogs and care for the house, essentially. And it started snowing, and we got very excited. And we took these dogs out for a walk on the fresh snow, and it was super late at night, and we had this full moon. And we ran around with the dogs for a while, made a few snow angels, and then brought the dogs back inside and went to the town square in this tiny, tiny village called Carstensen. And we went to this town square at like 11 p.m. and built like 5 snowmen in this town square. It was super late at night, and the biggest one was in the middle of the square, and we rolled up like 4 or 5 huge snowballs and then stacked them on top of each other, made one huge base, and then another one, and then another one, and it was so big. And then a few other ones around the square. So that was really fun. And I felt like my whole missing of winter in Minnesota, because winter is most of the seasons in Minnesota, it feels like sometimes it's like half the year. I was missing that, and so I felt like all of my pent up Minnesota winter energy got put into this giant snowman, which was really fun.
How tall did it stand?
It was taller than me, so probably about 6 feet, maybe a little more.
And what accessories did you have for it? Anything?
We didn't have anything.
It doesn't need any.
No, but we got really creative with like shaving the sides to make it seem really round, and like,
That's cool.
yeah, a few days later, after the snow was melting, we saw the other ones that were smaller melted pretty quickly, but this big one in the middle slowly turned into this like just pile of snow. And as we were walking by one day, we saw a little kid running around and picking up chunks of snow and running back over to the big pile and just adding it to the pile. So it was continuing. Yeah, that was really fun. But before that snow, I was experiencing what felt like spring. It really felt like I was in Bulgaria for the temperatures that started getting colder and going into the winter, and then the temperatures that felt like, okay, we're past the worst of it, which when I was living in Minnesota felt like February was maybe when we would start getting past the worst of it. also felt like it was when a lot of people were hitting their biggest like seasonal depression lows because that long of a winter can be really difficult sometimes.
I don't think I struggle with that. Is that something you've gone through in the past, living in a winter state like Minnesota?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I've been around it a lot. Lots of people in my life are affected by the weather, and I think it just has to do with such a long winter. It feels like it's 6 months long. Like there can be snow from October to April. Like I've had snow in early April. If you've lived there long enough, it seems like it's not so uncommon.
You catch it in May about once a decade, I'd say.
Yeah. So having winter be that long can be really difficult, especially when I was living in very northern Minnesota in the beautiful city of Duluth that I love so much. It can be really hard to be inside and away from the sun and kind of shut away from people because you can't go outside without it being dangerous for some parts of this season. And so experiencing a really nice kind of warm, playful snow was really nice. And then having spring come so early in the environment around me was a really novel experience.
There's got to be like way more experiences than we're going to spend the time talking about right now.
Yeah.
But I've already got a few questions just based on what you said.
Sure.
One that I want you to answer based on the 90 days in Bulgaria. When you entered Bulgaria, did you have an expectation of how much time you might spend there before probably going somewhere else? Or how does that, and I guess that ties into the other places you've been. When you enter a new situation, how flexible are you and how far ahead are you really thinking most of the time? Because you started, how long ago?
Started in July.
July in Europe, and currently it's the latter part of February as we record this.
Yeah. So many months.
Many months. And how flexible have you been during that time? How much planning? How does that go? I'm certainly someone else could do it maybe somewhat differently, but for you, what's that experience been like?
Yeah, of course. The most that I've planned so far was my first stop, and that was just kind of for security reasons, making sure I knew when I landed I would have somewhere to go that was a little concrete. I wanted to find my footing a little bit, and that was in Romania. I went to go work at a kids camp, like a summer camp, where everything was taught in English and you could be an English teacher, and we're essentially a camp counselor. And that I had planned to stay for, I think, 7 weeks, and then I would go wherever felt right. There was a concert I wanted to see, maybe. Everything else after that was a potential, and I didn't want to tie myself down to it. I wanted to be as free as I possibly could to go wherever felt the most right for me in my soul and in the deepest parts of me. And a lot of that trip has been that, going to a place for any reason and then feeling it and feeling what the next step is that's best. So Romania felt really good, and then it felt good to leave early. It felt right to leave early, and I did. And then I was supposed to go to this other workaway, because this is the way I've been doing this for so long with such little money, is work exchange, volunteer exchange. So I use the site Workaway, where I talk to someone, see their profile, see what projects they have. They see my profile, what I'm all about in words and pictures and reviews if I have those, and see if we're a good fit time-wise and what we want to exchange. And I was supposed to go to this place in Italy, in northern Italy, that was close to the city where my favorite band was going to play. It was their first time in Europe, and I got on a bus and was staying over a couple nights in Venice because I was going to pass through. I was like, oh, I'll see Venice. Had a strange experience in Venice. But while I was waiting those few days, I got a message from them. When I checked in, I was like, hey, I'll be there in 2 days. Do I need to bring anything extra? They replied, oh, sorry, we're full now. you can't come, which was not what I was expecting. And so I very quickly had to figure out the next place to go. And that changed my whole journey because I had met someone in a city in Romania on my way out. And they gave me the phone number of a different place that I could connect if I needed to. I was like, oh no, I have a place, don't worry, I guess I'll take it in case. And I really needed that.
At that moment.
At that moment, I
saved
did.
You.
And I ended up going to this completely different place that brought me to a bunch of different other places, as life does sometimes.
Life does that. So you're, 8, 9 months, whatever the math is right now, is a small scale life. You're like living a life in Europe, and theoretically, legally, as a U.S. citizen, how long could you do this going? You've explained to me that, I forget, what's the name of the
Schengen zone.
Schengen. So you can be in certain countries for a total of 90 days.
Within 180 days, yeah.
Within 180 days, and then you go.
Then you can go to other countries.
So if you did 90, 90, 90, 90, 90, you could do that indefinitely.
I've met people who have been traveling for 5 years, 10 years, and they're just doing it. There's so many different ways that people do it. It's fascinating. Some people are photographers. I met a tattoo artist who travels to different places and volunteers at tattoo shops. I guess not volunteers, he gets paid, but this is enough to support their travel, because all you need to pay for with this way of traveling is the transportation and anything extra. I actually calculated today about my average daily cost.
Yes, how much has it been?
Including plane tickets, which were, the flight here was 500
Has it been just one flight so far?
Yes.
Okay.
I try not to fly as much as possible, mostly for the environment and cutting down on even one transatlantic flight is really important.
There's more we can talk about that when we get to it, but I want you to finish.
Yep.
This.
With including this the most expensive thing has been my plane ticket here. Including big ferry rides and bus rides all over. Oh, and one really expensive train in France. My average daily cost has been $19 a day.
$19 a day.
And if I took out those other calculations, it would be less than that.
So $19 a day, and gradually decreasing probably on average based on the longer you're here, the longer before your next flight.
Yeah, and the longer I stay in one place. Bulgaria was a very cheap country to be for me as someone who is not earning money there. There's the whole, is that fair question? But I stayed in one place for month and a half, almost 2 months, and I was spending money maybe once a week at the local shop, and it was maybe $10.
Because with the arrangement, you had a place to sleep, and the food was provided.
Yeah, I didn't need to be spending any money.
Yeah.
All the money I have been spending has either been for transportation, which is me wanting to go to another place, or it has been wine, or a new shirt, or something that I feel like I want in that moment. But I think everything I've spent money on has been a want, besides maybe some medical things. Everything else has been provided for me. It's fantastic.
And then with our time here, this has been also rare, I'd imagine, on your trip, that it's like a vacation. You're not exchanging any time for any compensation anyway, so you're spending more right now because of us.
Because of
being
you.
here.
Yeah, for you. I'm glad you're here.
Okay.
I'm glad my dad is here too. Having people come and join me on the travel is something I put out there, especially for people who matter a lot to me, like my family and my younger brother and this love of mine and other loves of mine. And everyone is a totally new experience, but oftentimes if the idea in this other person's head is to have a vacation, which often is the only way they can do it. Not everyone can drop what they're doing for months or weeks at a time and go work on a farm.
We could. For many of us, and me included, even though I feel super flexible and free in a lot of ways, I would have to stop doing certain things that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Meeting you, and there's some other people that I'm going to meet or see again later in this trip that have done things a little bit different than what you're doing, but they're also in countries that they're not born in.
Yeah.
And surviving for probably a lot less money than people realize.
Yeah.
That I know that I'm going to be influenced by this,
Yeah.
by what you and others have done. And it's just a matter of, at the end of this, how much thought I put into doing my version of what you're doing. It definitely can be done. It's not like, I mean, if you have children, maybe it's more challenging and things like that.
Yeah.
But you've explained it. You're spending $19 a day over the course of that many months.
On average.
On average.
Yeah.
On average.
Yeah, and I really like those words too. It's important to me to, I guess, recognize that it is something that most people can do. It does take changing your life around a lot if you want to change your life around a lot and change the way you're living your life. There's a lot of letting go and shaking up your parameters of how you want to live.
So there's so many things I know we can talk for a long time about, but what you just said there, changing up how you want to live, that relates to a question you've asked me once or twice, and your dad just like an hour or two ago. You asked about or suggested something about someone's energy. And you've already talked about this with when you've decided to leave somewhere. I think it relates to that. If you're not feeling like this is where I should be, it seems like you're in a situation where pretty quickly you can or will move on.
Yeah.
And in the United States of America, many people, majority of the people, probably damn near everybody, have the type of a life that if your energy is, I don't like what's going on in my life, either we've trained ourselves to think we can't do much about it, or we're in a situation where financially and different commitments make it really challenging to do much about it.
Yeah.
And I want to explore that. The energy, feeling, not feeling something, and then knowing that, okay, it's time to move on.
Yeah. Nice. That's neat. I really like using the word energy. I know it sometimes comes with this connotation of maybe mystical spirituality or something that is very far removed from science or something like this. For me, that's not how I use that word. I guess I just want to preface that because I was involved with the academic and scientific community for many years, and that's just what I'm going to say about it. For me, energy and listening to my own energy is just paying attention to how my body feels, because oftentimes how my mind is feeling and how my existence is existing manifests itself in my body. And I think that's really important for me to recognize, and often is similar for other people. And paying attention to that, I've been able to sharpen my mindfulness skills and pay attention to what I feel like. That seems pretty simple, but it's been a complex and difficult journey to try and be as attuned to it as I like to be. And there are certain parts of this journey that I've been on where this traveling journey, there's life journey and all the other journeys that are happening at the same time. During this travel journey, I have felt more and less connected to my own energy, like listening to my own energy. And when I've felt the most connected to it, I have felt so much magic just in everyday life. I was thinking about some sort of question I had about traveling or the way people think about things, the way I think about things, and then I will meet someone at a bus stop, transfer at 3 a.m. who has insights to this very specific question about how can I love people more, or how can I remember how much I love everything. And embody that more to people around me. And I'll meet someone who is currently thinking about all these ways that they have learned to love other people in the world and will spontaneously share this with me. And I think whether or not I was aware that that was a question I was having or holding, this information would still have been brought to me. Information is constantly being brought to me and everyone. But being aware of what answers I am currently seeking helps me spot them when they come to me. And it happens so quickly.
To me, this is something I'm trying to better understand about myself, and perhaps it relates to everyone, is these connections that we're making in our mind so frequently. Like anytime we have a new idea, to me, and perhaps scientific studies kind of back this up, I'm trying to learn more about it, but we can't really have a new idea. We can't just totally come up with something that doesn't connect to anything ever. We're building on different things that we're taking in our life. So it's new in a way. It's certainly new to us at times, but it's adding to somewhat maybe related, sometimes unrelated things, and then the connection hits in our mind, and then it's there. So if you had been thinking about these questions and someone else says something to you that's totally unrelated to anything you're thinking about, it's information that you're just less ready or willing to take in. But if someone has information that is replying to one of these questions you had, suddenly your answer happens. And I think we can all experience that very frequently if we're open to what's going on around us and are very mindful of our thoughts and what they really have been meaning for us and what we're hoping for.
Yeah, nice. Good words. I had two thoughts to that. I might not remember the second one. I don't right now, but it might come to me as I'm talking about the first one. The first one is relating to this idea of free will, right? If the reason that I am sitting in this chair is because of every single thing that has ever happened to me.
Yeah.
And the genes I was born with, and the psychology of my parents and my environment that has been shaping me and shaping my mind through my entire life has led me to have the brain that I have in this moment that is responding to this environment that exists in this way, in this moment. And coming to that leads to these questions of whether or not I ever actually have a choice, ever. I don't know, but I think accepting that it's very possible that my choices were going to happen no matter what. If existence was going to happen and this Big Bang was going to explode a bunch of life into the world, it couldn't have happened any other way because it didn't.
Have you been listening to previous episodes of the podcast?
No, no, I downloaded some, but I haven't listened quite yet.
Episode, I think 9 and 35 specifically, I get into my revelation about free will, or perhaps the lack of free will, which is the side of it that I've come to realize seems to be what's happening. I mean, I don't have all the answers. I can only raise my hand and say, this is the one that I'm currently going with because it seems like the best for reasons X, Y, and Z. And you laid out my argument about as similarly to anyone I've met, especially those that I haven't told that I've already come to that conclusion that it's probably not going to happen. It can't happen any other way than it's happening, but still the sensation, the experience for us as humans feels like we have all this control. We feels like I could have done that, when we probably can't. Or actually, instead of probably, based on the way that I believe it or understand it, you can't. But the feelings that arise in those moments are arising because our mind at that moment in time works the way it does, and we feel what we feel when we feel like, I should have done that thing, or I wish I would have done that thing. Oh, I wanted to do that thing. And that thing that we didn't do seems to be better than what happened or what we did.
Yeah, and it can be a useful brain pattern too, is thinking about what you could have done may influence a decision that you make in the future. but that thought pattern maybe was going to happen anyway, no matter what, right, moving forward, which is super neat. One thing, the second...
The other thing, you got it?
Yeah, I had
Nice
it.
job. I usually forget about them.
I put my fingers down here, which maybe can be seen. Sometimes if I have a thought, I pick this up from my mom, I'll like put a finger down here to try and remember what it was. It doesn't always work. Sometimes I just have fingers.
Well, it at least is an indication to you that there was a second thought that you're trying to grab. Otherwise, we could get so deep into something else you've totally forgotten. But that's usually what happens. I forget that I mentioned that there's going to be something else.
But sometimes that's how it's supposed to go.
Yeah, well, it can't happen either way.
Okay, the other thing was that, okay, I have a bunch of words, and I'm going to go with this one, which is that information that is going to be brought to me, consciously or subconsciously, I think is brought to me no matter whether or not I'm conscious of it, which I mentioned a little bit ago already. I just wanted to expand on it a little bit. Beautiful things are happening constantly, and there have been times in my life where I've been so aware of it that it is everything all the time. And a beautiful thing is that whether or not I'm aware that everything is always beautiful, it is still always beautiful. And I've had some difficult conversations, difficult for me, where someone, a specific example in my head is I was driving in a car with someone past a obvious monoculture field. This was in Bulgaria. And we were driving just through these fields of monoculture, wheat or whatever it was. And
by monoculture, you mean the same things planted there, and that field is by humans been made to plant
only
the same
be
thing.
this one crop, which is extremely disruptive to ecosystems and a very unsustainable way to grow anything, and is extremely problematic for caring for this world. And I know that. And as much as I can know anything. And this person that I was driving with, when I said that, wow, this is so beautiful, look at the sun and the trees and the birds in this environment that we were driving through, they were a little bit appalled that I could find beauty in this space. Because the only thing that they had in their mind was how terrible this was for the planet, and how local gypsies were being used as slaves to harvest these crops and being paid super unfairly, and all of the negative parts of this thing that was in front of us were alive and present for them in those moments. When for me, I was just seeing the sun and the green and the birds and the trees there. And we got into this conversation of recognizing and accepting that that these terrible parts of this thing that was in front of us exist, is different from being okay with it and not wanting to do anything about it. In that moment, we couldn't do anything about these terrible things that were happening. And I was finding beauty in the parts of the beauty that I could find there, not really consciously, but and how they just had some trouble accepting that my acceptance of the negativity there let me find beauty. I guess I'm losing some of the words there, but it was a difficult conversation.
I totally get your point, and I think I can relate it to my experiences with you on this trip so far. And I don't know how much of this we'll get into before the end of this conversation, but there's certain choices that you've made maybe over recent months and years that are different than the ones that I currently do, and maybe different than the ones that you used to do. And I'll just throw one out, like you're a vegetarian right now.
Yeah.
And you are a vegetarian that, from my perspective of you interacting with me or your dad, who currently still eat meat, you're not looking for the reasons you've chosen to not eat meat. You don't see us eating meat or telling you that we ate meat earlier and look at us with some sort of a negativity about it. Whereas maybe someone that reacted the way that that person did in that car ride, that takes an attitude of just searching for the negatives, might treat someone different. Not saying that person would in that moment, but there's an energy. You were looking for as much beauty as you can find, and that gives you an aura about yourself that I am more receptive to wanting to learn from you because you have this positive attitude about the things that you do in your life. Whereas if someone comes around me and sees something different than I see it and explains it in such a negative way, I don't want that person. I'm not going to listen to that person.
Yeah.
And so you two seem to agree on all the things that in the car ride about the negative qualities of that situation, but your ability to still not focus on it and change the mood based on it, to me, seems like the superior way to approach that in any situation.
Yeah, nice, neat. One thing that I guess my initial response to all the words you just put into the world is that it's difficult for me to ever blame someone for having any perspective. Not that I think you were blaming this person or anything like that, but in the way of if this person's brain as it is in this moment is a whole history of their whole experience, I can only ever be interested in it. And this existence, if I'm picking this moment and everything that exists, I really might lose my train of thought. I'm thinking about how this other person that I love makes fun of me for saying exists all the time, but it's important to me. So if I pick this moment where everything exists as it is, there is so much beauty in it, in the entire world, the entire universe. Everything that's happening is super beautiful in some way, maybe. But there are also terrible things happening. The only thing that exists for me right now is what I can perceive. And I've tried to put words to this before, and I get closer every time I do it, so I'm going to try again. Right now, what is existing for me is what I can sense and perceive. So it is, as I'm talking, my words coming through to my ears. I'm thinking about my clothes on my body. I'm thinking about the temperature in this room. I'm thinking about you being next to me, and sometimes thinking about how my voice is being recorded, and not much else, unless we get to another topic where something exists for me. A way that I talk about this sometimes is my family. I love my family so much, and I don't love them when they don't exist for me. And this is a way of kind of simplifying the universe for me, and I'm still figuring out the best way to phrase it, but in every moment, I can only love and try and give more beauty and find more beauty in what is existing for me, which doesn't necessarily mean the physical world around me. It can be a hypothetical situation, it can be someone that is far away, it can be an idea, but I can't focus on everything at once, and what I can give my attention to is where I want to give it fully.
I don't know how that compares to previous times you've tried to explain it, but I've never heard you try to explain this before. And for me, this is one of those new piece of information that's hitting me, because I've never heard someone bring that up at all. And for me to try to bring it back to you and see if I understood it correctly,
I like that.
It's that you have much love to give, but truly, whatever is not in your thought process, in your mind, in your space, somehow hitting one of your senses, like your family is using an example, you love them dearly, but if they're totally out of your mind at that moment and you're in a different space with other people or with other things or with nature, and your family is not a part of any of this, in that moment, in each moment as an individual moment, you don't love them because nothing in your being is giving any love towards them because they're somewhere else. And whatever is around you, you can love in that moment.
Yeah.
And that's every moment in succession. And then your dad's here right now, so you can love him in a way you maybe haven't in a while because you're spending time with him and he's in your space.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for giving that back to me in some words. That's helpful.
Is that correct or close?
I think that's correct, as much as it can be for me. I want to always be growing and changing my words for it, but I like those a lot, and it's really nice to have. One other example I want to bring up that has been newer for me is this person that I love in the other room over there. Their name is Ro, and we've been living life next to each other for a really long time, like 5 years, 6 years, something like this. And we're in a polyamorous relationship. I live my life with polyamory, meaning that, I don't know, meaning I want to love anyone next to me as much as I possibly can in whatever way makes the most sense for us. And some words that Ro has brought up recently that I really like, that I resonate with pretty strongly, is that it is very freeing to, in any given moment, be able to make up your mind or choose to actively love this person or actively interact with this person in whatever way makes the most sense. Both of us have the understanding that at any point we could see each other again. I could walk out of this room and go find them and say, hey, I don't want to see you again for many years. Like, this is how I feel right now. I just don't feel a great love for you, and I need to move on. And we would talk about it more, probably. But the way that this relationship is with no expectation. In every moment you can be anything, and you can love in whatever way makes the most sense. And I guess that's related to what I was just trying to say.
Loving what's with you and your surroundings and what's in your mind at that time, and not thinking that you should or have to love things that, or people that aren't necessarily present in the same way that you can give your love to those and everything that is present. Yeah,
and not always physically present. You know, if someone comes to my mind that I love, then in that moment I will be loving them, right?
Yes.
In my brain, I'm loving them so much, and even if that experience is just mine, it's still there and it's still real for me. But I can't interact with anything that isn't present with me in some way.
And surprisingly, like, the free will thing has come up in a few episodes. We're in the 60s now. I don't know precisely this time as we're recording this, which episode this will be. But polyamory, polyamorous relationship, this is something that I've learned a lot about. Haven't necessarily experienced much, but my belief on how, for me, perhaps to best live, and maybe there's others that haven't realized that this is like an option, that people are successfully like achieving their life in this way, and just people with a lot of love to give. And instead of thinking, okay, because everyone's always taught me I need to give that love to one person and restrict it in that way, well, in some cases, I think relationships end, not fail, stop, for a variety of reasons, but some is, and I've experienced it, where I feel I have more love to give than for the individual that I'm with, quote unquote, air quotes here, that it becomes a struggle for me to communicate that with the person that I'm with and they don't understand it or accept it, and a variety of things have happened in my life that I've learned that, okay, I need to really communicate about this extremely well and understand that not everyone's going to agree with it, want it, or accept it, but it is a challenge because commonly we grow up in a situation, I did, and I think for a lot of people, where what we're feeling when it comes to love and how we love and who we want to love doesn't match the structure that has been put in place by our family or the society we live in. And a lot of people struggle in their loving relationships, I think, related to this. And just the you bringing this up, thank you, because I haven't gotten to it in hours and hours and hours and hours of conversations I've had with people. But I think how it relates to what we're talking about, at least from my perspective, is in that moment where you're loving what is in your surrounding, like you're giving your energy as best you can to love what is near. And when you're someone that's in a situation where you are committedly loving to someone that isn't in that space, and knowing that they won't be happy if you are loving in any way someone else in that space, not necessarily physically or sexually, just the fact that you're having any enjoyment with this other person and that would bother them, that really fucks up the mind. And to try to like be happy and love people, and because you're thinking someone else not going to like this, that's a part of it that I don't know why we live that way, why so many of us have lived that way, where we continue. You're choosing not to. I just gave a lot there, so
I like it. I like it all. I love it all. One thing I think, being in a relationship where any type of intimacy, friendship intimacy, sharing, loving in some way, even if it's a monogamous relationship, is frowned upon by one partner, just can be very unhealthy. That can manifest in a really unhealthy way. You can't have any friends that are the gender you're attracted to, etc., etc. It can be controlling. That's a whole nother thing. But one thing that I learned, one thing that seems to be relatively common and was kind of one of the many reasons that I started trying to change how I structured my romantic relationships, was feeling any sort of want to interact with someone that maybe falls out of what is accepted in traditional monogamous relationships, right? Like wanting to hug someone for longer or spend many hours with another person alone, where if you have a partner, a long-term partner, then maybe that's not accepted. Maybe you're going to be cheating on this person. And if that is the commitment that you've made, that I made with another person, and I said that I'm not going to be, oftentimes monogamous relationships, in my experience, come with all of these unsaid rules that are not really talked about. And if someone breaks one that isn't all the way understood that they are breaking it, let's say spending a bunch of time with someone else, and the other partner sees that as breaking what should be done in a monogamous relationship, it can be so confusing. And I was finding myself wanting to interact with other people in the world in ways that were outside of this traditional monogamy, very essentially. And I recently learned, always learning, recently encountered this big, super cool connection with a person right at the beginning of my travels in Hungary on my way to Romania. And we got along just like instantly, so fast. And we spent like 3 days together because we wanted to and we could, and just more and more getting to know each other were just fantastic. It was so great, and I really, really enjoyed this person and ended up going back to visit them in Romania for a while. And it seemed like both of us recognized this really intense connection and assumed that it was supposed to be a romantic and or sexual partnership. And this was after I have been living my life polyamorously. And recently we had this conversation. I haven't seen them for a few months now, but we had this conversation about this assumption that we had, because neither of us were really feeling a super intense connection on the sexual end of this relationship. We hadn't seen each other for a while, but kind of recognizing that when we were with each other, it was this connection about being alive is so cool, history is really neat, traveling is so neat. I really like the way that you view the world, and you seem to really like the way I view the world, and we learned so much about what existence is like in general. We're very good at information exchange about mind and all of this thing. It's a super beautiful thing, but figuring out that that can be our relationship if we want it to be, and it doesn't have to have this assumed anything else. It seems like both of us assumed that because we had this really, really intense intimacy in a bunch of ways, it meant that we probably also had this other intimacy.
I don't know if you've gotten to that part of it with this person yet, but whether it had to come or it should work, it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily going to work right or match up right. It doesn't take anything away from what else you have together.
Yeah.
You shouldn't.
Yeah. So it was this great conversation we had just a few days ago, and was another just learning point and reminder that any relationship can be anything. And for us at this point, in this moment at least, it seems like what works best for us is being really psyched about life together and being intimate in this way, in whatever way works best for us, but not in this sexual way. Romantic is a hard one to define because I want to woo most of my friends, and I want to tell them I love them all the time and get them flowers and whatever. Not that that means romantic, this is all, it's hard to define that completely, but.
Mariah.
Hi.
Let's change subjects now. And I knew you as Mariah. I've only known you now for less than a week. And I guess it's been like 5 or 6 days since I first met you in Athens.
Yeah.
But I've known your dad now for 3, 4, 5 years. I forgot exactly what that is. And when he talks about you, he calls you Mariah.
Yep.
Every time I've been with you, and probably even when you met me, you've introduced yourself differently. And that's going to lead into a few things. And I forget if it's something we talked about earlier. Hopefully it'll come back up, because I think I didn't put my fingers down here to help myself remember what I wanted to talk about. Maybe we'll get to it. If we don't, please forgive me.
Okay.
What if I'm new again right now? I'm reintroducing myself and I don't know you.
Oh, wow.
Hi, I'm Curt.
Oh, Curt, nice to meet you. My name's Moss.
Moss. Is that your given name?
It's not, but it's what I like to go by.
Okay. Why? Well, of course, I know it's not your given name. Why do you like to go by Moss, and when did this come about?
Well, Moss feels great to me in the real world, and as something that can exist more for me, and it seems to be existing for me as my name as I'm traveling. And when I first started traveling, I for whatever reason, I've gone by Mariah my whole life. I've had a few nicknames given to me by friends. One was Maya, which was fun. I briefly went by the nickname Marie in college, which was silly.
So you're just deleting some letters from your name.
Yeah, it was
both of those are deleting letters from your name.
Yes.
Moss isn't.
Moss is not. Moss is one that I was given as a possibility when I was talking about the possibility of changing my name or going by a different name for a little while. By Roe, they were searching for a more gender neutral name for themselves and found it very easily in a really beautiful way. And I was kind of searching for a more gender neutral name as well. Mostly to be like, fuck the binary, everything's a spectrum, including gender, and it's important to me. But also something that felt right for me. And when I first started traveling, I went by Mari for a little while, and it didn't stick. I didn't like it or feel connected to it very much. I went by Maya sometimes, and I found that if I ever was going by Mariah as I was traveling, especially in the Balkans, especially in Italy, if someone found out my name was Mariah, they would call me Maria. And
okay.
and I don't feel connected to that name at all. I really love my given name. It came to me in a really cool way. Before I was born, my mom had a dream that this red-headed baby was like, hello, my name's Mariah. And then she gave birth to a baby with red hair and was
so
like,
cool.
I don't have a choice in this. And I think it's a beautiful name. I really like it, but it felt inside of me. It felt like it was time to change that a little bit. And when I started introducing myself to people as Moss, it worked really well. I'm thinking about the first person I did this with, and it was this really beautiful connection that I made in Timișoara, Romania.
Never heard of it.
It's a little city. It's great. One of the bigger cities in Romania. But I met this person from Israel. And their name was Oran. And I can't totally make the throat noise. It's like the Oran.
I'm not going to try.
And I had been staying at this hostel, and it was really a great time. And it was one of those, like, I see this person and they saw me very clearly, and I saw them very clearly, which happens sometimes. And it's usually a really powerful experience. And they asked me my name, and I said Moss for the first time. And it felt extremely true to me. And they were like the plant, like life. And then told me what the name was in Israel. And I don't remember. I look it up sometimes because it's beautiful, but it's hard to pronounce. It was close to Much. But then he called me that all night, and it was great. We went out and had some adventures. I found a really strange dance club in the industrial district. It was a really strange night. But this beautiful connection that I made was the first time I introduced myself that way, and it felt more true than anything else I've ever called myself that I was able to choose. And so I've stuck with it.
And I suppose because we're in Europe and you're meeting people from different nationalities and different languages, easier for people to remember and say correctly than other names you might give them. Yeah. Sometimes it is easier for people, especially when they connect it to this green thing that grows on rocks. And and sometimes Mariah is hard to remember for one reason or another. People often connect it to Mariah Carey, who is someone that I don't feel all that connected to, but I feel very connected to this planet, and I feel really connected to moss. I always have. It's something that I will always stop and feel and touch, and it's different everywhere, and I've experienced so many different kinds of moss on this journey, and so many different kinds of myself on this journey. And so it feels really nice, and it might be something that's a little hard to continue with when I do return to my hometown. But I also believe that if I tell the people that love me that I might want to be referred to in this way, then they will respect that. I generally have people in my life that care about me and respect me, so it's pretty cool. I like these people in my life. I don't have too much more time with you before we depart each other on this trip. And even by the end of this conversation, how I do it, I don't know. So I have a thing, and it's my thing, and I think it's kind of beautiful in its own way, is I don't give people nicknames, very rarely. And not saying Moss is necessarily a nickname, maybe it's a name, but I like calling people by their given name, especially those people that almost never use it.
Really? Why?
Well, the place that I work with your father, our name badges has everyone's real name. So I've begun to I learn people's given name and call them by that.
That's
and
why
then,
you call my dad Bradley.
That's why I call him Bradley, yes. And so when other people start calling someone by a name that's not on the badge, I like to still call them by the name on the badge, even though I know that that's not their name. For me, it's a fun way to have if I'm one of the very few people that calls someone by their given name, I feel like it's a special connection coming from me. Maybe not everyone receives it that way, and I should be more aware of that. But I think there's something about that. I don't choose my given. No one chooses their given name, the name given to them. And do I like or love my name? I don't know. It's Curt. It's not Curtis. People sometimes question why it's not Curtis. And it's Curt. That's what mom and dad decided. I don't know.
Yep.
This is the name that's given to me. I've lived my life with this being my name. I don't necessarily love it or not love it, like it or dislike it. It's my name. And when someone calls me by a name that's not Curt, I don't care. If they call me Curtis, sometimes I'll add an is to the end of their name just for the fun of it. Because to me, it's a thing. I don't, and maybe you feel a deeper connection than I do with names, or you're your own individual, so you're going to feel something probably not identical to what I feel, but we think and look at names maybe differently. And I do my thing, but I'm aware that you do your thing in your way.
Yep.
So now I need to better consider how I communicate with you and then other people based on that. I don't know how exactly this is going to change for me, but at least I have this consideration. The idea is now going in my mind in a way that it wasn't previously.
Yeah, I have something to add to that.
Yes.
So I have been pretty active in the queer community, and names are often a pretty big deal there. A name that is one given to you, to someone, can often be tied to many other expectations, especially for people who have a very stereotypically masculine or feminine name, but don't feel very stereotypically masculine or feminine a lot of the time. And so choosing a new name, or choosing a name that feels better or closer to them, can be super freeing and a way to take back their identity. This is not my experience with choosing this name or finding this name. If with a lot of these stories that I've heard from people, it's not always like choosing a name. It's like another name comes to them.
It arises in some way and it feels right.
Yeah, which is super beautiful also. And that's similar to my experience. I don't get super dysphoric, and I don't feel disconnected from the person that is identified with Mariah, other than the fact that I haven't said that name out loud in a while. And I suppose, wow, that threw me off saying it. That's so interesting. It's a different experience for me, for sure, but I completely lost my train of thought when I said that name, and that's really interesting. I want to acknowledge that this experience that I'm having is different from a lot of the queer community, but I've been near people who have been given a new name by the universe or by themselves or by this community somehow, and using their given name would feel terrible and would almost be like calling them something that they are not and that they do not identify with anymore. And so hearing your perspective on this, I'm sure, is not influenced by you wanting to have a negative experience for anyone, of course.
No, and really, and there are individuals I don't call by their given name because I sense that they really don't want it.
Yeah.
I can right now a couple come to my mind
Yeah.
as we're talking about it. This isn't a 100% thing,
I didn't
but
think so.
I feel like if it seems right and it feels like there's a connection, your dad, I don't know anyone else that calls him Bradley, and he doesn't dislike it. Perhaps I've asked him. Usually I'll ask if that's okay at some point, especially if I get closer with the person and like get a little deeper into the conversation. But I say it as often as possible too, because I don't know. I think I'm here on this trip with him, with you.
Yeah.
Is it because I call him Bradley? I don't know. Does that relate to it in some way that I've built a connection with him strong enough that I'm on this family vacation of sorts?
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. But I try to build connections, and if I think it's a useful tool to building a special connection with someone, I do like to go that route. Clearly, I wouldn't use someone's name I wouldn't call someone a name they don't like, whether it's some mean word or their given name, if it really somehow seems to not be a good thing for them.
Yeah, I wouldn't think you would. It's very interesting to hear your perspective on it. It's neat. Names are interesting. And I really like the one that I'm using in my life right now. You can call me Mariah or Moss. I will leave that to you.
This will keep me up tonight.
And I will, just because I am kind of existing as both right now, and I'm with my dad right now, who is calling me Mariah, as he has my whole life. Oh, but he mostly calls me Raya, if you've noticed that, which is just the second half of my name, which I do adore. And Ro is calling me Moss, because they are. And that feels really nice, and they know that feels really nice. It's nice to kind of be existing with all of them at once.
While we're on the name topic, the they, them, I get it. And you talked about just a few minutes ago, somewhat, you alluded to the spectrum and different things. To my understanding previously, and you can define yourself how you want here shortly. Previously, they has become the proper pronoun to use for an individual that chooses to have it. And oftentimes, I think it's someone that has had maybe a transgender type of experience or background. I think that's where it's mainly come to be. Like, what is the proper word for someone that doesn't identify or maybe used to identify differently? And you have used it for yourself. And I'm going to have a conversation with Ro shortly. And I don't know exactly how that's going to work for they, even though to me it's him and you are she. You talked just about yourself. You've seemed to adopt this from I noticed a few times. I don't know if it's every time, and I don't know how easy it is to always change that when you've gone your whole life maybe using a different pronoun. You identify, or maybe they have identified you as they, and it's a changing of very firm language in my mind that I'm okay with why it's happening, and that it could happen. It's difficult, and I want you to elaborate on this and why this is happening for you.
Cool, thank you. I just had a short conversation with someone about this an hour and a half ago. Using pronouns they, them are gender-neutral pronouns. And
that used to be plural, but now are okay as singular. At least I grew up, I was incorrect if I used they to identify a singular person at some point in English class.
Well, like the lexicon of the English language is constantly shifting and changing, and so correct or incorrect is totally
based on usage and not on...
Yeah, debatable. I think the only thing that exists is right now, yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
But if you found someone's phone on the ground, you just see a phone on the ground, and you're like, oh shoot, someone lost their phone. I hope they find it again. We should see if we can contact them somehow. You don't know if this person is a gender or whatever, but oftentimes for people, automatically, they would already know how to use they or them in that type of situation. Yeah. And I think I don't completely know the history of it. I just know how people have told me they like to be referred to and how much sense it makes for me. Because, I don't know, the freedom of not having to be tied to a certain gender, or even like talking about a person. I have a partner who is in Minnesota right now and is going to fly to Thailand pretty soon. And if I'm casually talking about this person, I could be talking about them, I could be saying this person. It's automatic for me now, which is super cool. I'm really glad that most of the time that's how my brain is able to do it. But it doesn't matter if they are male or female for me loving them, or for their actions in the world, or for all of this. And using they, them as a default, which is what I try to do most of the time, unless someone specifies, oh, I like she, her, or I like he, him, just like puts gender a little bit back, because it doesn't matter so much. And I guess I prefer being called they, them, mostly because I like fucking with the binary. But I do identify as female, and I feel more, most of the time I feel more feminine than masculine, but that swings all over the place and can change in any moment. But being referred to as they, them feels more free to me. But I'm also very comfortable being referred to as she, her, and I do enjoy that. But as a default, because I feel that freedom, I want to give that freedom to other people, especially when they say that they are some sort of gender conforming to the stereotypes.
It seems to me like you're an early adopter to something that likely, hopefully, I suppose, as time goes on, becomes a more normalized thing for everybody, and you see it based on your experiences with different people that definitely require that or really want the they or them. You're joining them in this experience of this makes sense for them, and it can make sense for me, even though it's different, me being you, even though it's a little not, you don't quite have the same type of experience, but you really can relate and accept and love the fact that they're on their journey. And you can go on at least part of that journey with them by adopting the they and them, and just knowing that for much of history, and usually in favor of the men, there's been a gender discrimination in different ways that has made women's lives less free, less able to make as much money. Probably a whole long list of things that aren't coming to my mind right now. That commonly people see that as an issue, and have now for some time, and just the fact that we use he or she plays into that. I'm thinking that relates to one of the reasons among many that you're okay with just doing away with those words slowly but surely as much as we can.
Yeah, and it can be subconscious too, you know. I know that if someone is telling me a story about this guy that did this thing and then did this thing and did this thing, versus this woman who did this thing and did this thing and she did this, in my head, consciously or subconsciously, hopefully, I may have these stereotypes built up, even if it's the exact same story of someone doing something. I will have a different picture in my head of what that story was like, or whether or not I would take this person's side on the story just based on pronouns. And I think that's true subconsciously for a lot of culture, because of this subconscious patriarchal society that we've been living in for many decades. And just using they, them and kind of taking away the gender element when telling a story can, I don't know, give a clearer perspective, and just it just kind of takes gender out of the equation when it's not necessary. And I don't think it's necessary very often. There are people who do prefer to be referred to as she, her, or he, him, and that's great. And I will always respect that. There's also these other pronouns and all these like z, them, and things like this, which are harder for me to interact with because I haven't had anyone in my life consistently who uses those pronouns. But changing to they, them, or someone adopting a she, her pronoun that previously wasn't using it is hard, whether or not they're someone like very close to me or not. I will make a mistake probably over and over. And the most important thing with trying to change how I use pronouns for someone that I care about is recognizing that I probably will make a mistake, and it's okay as long as I, as fully as I can, communicate to them that I care very much and hear them and am trying to do this thing that is important to them. A lot of friends of mine who do want their pronouns to be different than automatically given sometimes have trouble even bringing it up or feeling safe to say, hey, I actually prefer they, them pronouns. Being able to say that sentence can be really scary. And a lot of people just don't do it.
Is it going to open up a conversation with that you maybe don't want to have in that moment, or then other people, naturally, I think we all can be quite judgmental, and we need to unlearn some of those traits that lead us to be judgmental. And I think relating to that, if someone's identifies he or she before you know who they are, then you have this picture in your mind. I'm going to try something here in just a second that I think relates to that, because our imaginations, no matter how imaginative we think we are, we project things based on what the information we have. We just automatically, I think, start getting these visuals based on what we know. And I understand what happens. It happens to me. We're going to do it still, probably, but making the types of choices or building a structure where less of that happens for ourselves and less of that happens overall to have possible negative influences on anyone that's not deserving of some sort of negative influence. Not that anyone's deserving, but just the natural negativity that happens to people because they exist in a way that others have perceived as less than for some reason. So here's my little experiment. I was going to ask you this earlier, decided not to, and for those watching on the video, maybe it's less meaningful, but if for the individuals listening and have listened start to finish, maybe they've drawn some conclusions or some assumptions, but I'm going to now have you, if you're willing, tell me your age, because you are very intelligent and very wise. I know your age, or about within a year, and to me you seem very smart in all these ways. And if a human, listening only to the conversation, if I ask you your age in the first minute and they know you're the number you're about to tell me, they may start judging what they're hearing from you differently. If you sit an age 30 years older than you're about to tell me, they might take your information differently, because we do that. We give more respect to certain ages depending on who we are and who we think has the right type of perspective for what we're looking for is a thing. And so tell me about yourself in that way and whatever else you think relates.
Oh, okay. I'm going to first tell you my observance of myself in reaction to your question.
Okay.
Because sometimes people ask me how old I am. I think that happens to many people, is being asked how old they are. And for a few reasons, my reaction to that question is often hesitant. Here's me hesitating.
Okay, so you don't want to tell. You don't have to tell me.
No, I would like to,
would.
and I'm going to. I mean, maybe I won't, but I'm planning to in this moment. I'm planning to. It's just something I want to say about it is that it's because of my own reaction to this question, I tend to not ask people how old they are, and for similar reasons to using they, them, I try to take it out of the equation when interacting with a person, because sometimes if someone tells me how old they are, moving forward, my perspective of them, like you just put into words, will be colored by that. Mm-hmm. And there have been a few instances where I accidentally unintentionally learned someone's age after knowing them for a while, and it took me a minute to, I guess, catch up to that reality, even though it's the same reality I've been living in. But it was essentially my stereotypes and preconceived notions about age catching up to how I knew this person based on my experience with them, which is neat. And maybe is going to happen to people as I say my age, which is now I've had a lot of build up to it.
But I feel like for me, just learning more about you, this has been educational. Mm-hmm. And for random person, whoever it might be, hearing us talk, there's mm-hmm. things that we've talked about, probably, maybe, not something they've heard of in the same way. Mm-hmm. And just us having this conversation about age, and then you telling me your age, is going to be, I think, a net positive on just the conversation itself, getting others to maybe think of age differently or just excuse it. Like, maybe I won't ask anyone their age anymore, but I probably not yet. As I'd like to know, but I don't like to judge on it, but maybe I am. Oh, no, I'm doing everything wrong. Go on.
Okay, so I am 23.
23.
And I have met people older than me who act much younger, and younger than me who act much older. But I even after saying those words, acting much older or much younger, I want to remove them and replace them with act with more wisdom or more mindfully. Or sometimes I meet people who are still hanging on to, from my perspective, still hanging on to like family ties that maybe they act like the youngest sibling in the world still and have maybe not been able to move past that, or maybe that's my own perspective of them, but yeah, I'm 23, I think. I lost track earlier this year. After my birthday, I didn't really think about it too much, and that was neat, but yeah, one reason I just want to add one note to it. One of the biggest reasons that it's a hesitant subject for me is because I went to college through a PSEO program, which is post-secondary enrollment options. Yeah. You can leave high school and go to a community college. It was the best thing I've done with my education. I went to this great community college, Inver Hills Community College. I really had a great experience there. And I went when I was 16 and then stopped going there when I was just before I turned 18 and left for college. I have a summer birthday, so I was always the youngest in my grade or close to it. And then I went to college and was mixing with all these people. And when they found out that I was 16, they had a super strong reaction to it, super strong reaction. And because of that, I really stopped telling people or avoided it as much as I could, because it seemed they just, even if we were having some sort of really nice conversation and talking about school, or maybe I had this friendship that was coming, or maybe I had a potential romantic something or other That's a little different because of legality and that
I
whole
think
thing.
16 is okay in Minnesota regardless. But
I know it
think of
is.
the difference. Anyhow, that's all.
Oh, I know it is. I really had to know.
Had to do your research back then?
Yes, I did. But no matter what kind of relationship it was, people would have, not always, but often had a super strong reaction to it. And usually it was negative. It was like, oh, God, okay, you're 16. And then I would not interact with them in the same way. It was because of that, I've kind of guarded it. And I also, for other reasons, was involved in other life experiences where the people around me were much older, and I was inhabiting a role that was typically filled by people who were much older than I was. And that's my experience with age.
I would say university. I mean, often most people are going to be in that 18 to 22, 23 range.
What was college, not university?
College.
I guess people can also go to the university.
Yes, okay. But the post high school, the first step post high school.
Yep.
Almost everyone's going to be that age. So those of you that took advantage of the great opportunity to get college credits while in high school and not pay for it at all.
Not at all. I didn't have to pay for the books either.
There's one of my nephews is doing it. I think one of my nieces did it. There's a lot of people doing it. And definitely, that seems like it's just financially, it's a move you can't avoid with how expensive post-secondary education is. There's the couple of years younger that you can be, and you certainly were. But there's also the non-traditional students that are 10, 15, 20, 30 years older that clearly are in a different age range. And I think some people are going to treat those people differently, or maybe most people will because of that. And because like college, university is for so long for this certain age group of people mostly. And if you get on the periphery of that, it becomes probably a different experience for you, but when other people know that, then it's going to be twice as different experience, and that's not great. And I think some workplaces it might be that. I don't really experience this a lot, or I don't see it this way, but if someone X number of years old has a boss that's X minus 15 years or something their age, that's going to be an issue because we perceive age in this way, and I guess we count from birth because that's the only time that we can be certain of. But I feel young, and if I could know how long before I die, hopefully many, many decades, if we can count number of years before we die, that'd probably be a better way to look at age or something, because I hadn't thought about that until this conversation. Because it's how you're living your life, what you're doing with your mind, and how you're interacting with those around you is more important than how many years since you were born. And I think how you're living your life relates a lot more to how many years you're looking to use usefully in the future, more so than the years that you've lived in the past.
Yeah. Something I want to add to that is that age is something that does not exist presently for me. I think those are good words for it. Where your age does not matter to me at all so far and in this moment. And what matters, what is real to me, is what is happening here right now, and whatever sensations I'm getting from you, whatever energy I'm getting from you, and whatever I'm thinking and experiencing flow out of me towards you or within me about you. And that's my experience of you. And
then I'm not going to tell you my age. It's on many other episodes, so if someone really wants to know, they listen to more, watch more, you'll find out.
Yeah, and it's something that just doesn't exist presently unless I'm presently thinking about it, or it's a present topic, I guess. And it can be something that is present, like being 23 years old is different it is a different experience than anything else, right? And I heard a story once about a group of like 5 people in a room all realizing they were 23 years old and being like, wow, we're all 23. What's it been like for you so far? What's it been like? We're all this age. That's neat. It's been different for all of us, I bet. What's it been like? And having this conversation about that. And that's really neat too. And then someone else walked into the room and they were 32. And so they had a different conversation,
Oh, yeah.
which is a cool story. It's Rose's story, so
Okay.
you could ask them about that if you
I might
want.
have to.
Yeah, so I guess maybe that's words for it I have right now. But that may change. And one thing that is really freeing for me and that I want to give to other people is that you don't have to be tied to anything that isn't existing for you right now.
And one thing I want to add to that before we move on, it's not jealousy. It may be a bit of envy. You've had, 8 months traveling continuously internationally, where I'm even realizing this just being so far gone a week on this trip for me, that it's vacation, so I'm not like working. Like, this is kind of work, I suppose, because I'm working on this project ongoing podcast. But otherwise, it's been totally freedom, activities, dining, some drinking, just like I don't have concern in the world. That's not your total experience because you are doing these work away things and have responsibilities. But the reason I bring this up is over these 8 months, you've gotten an amount of experience based on different countries, different people, different jobs, the different constant different interactions and ways. Like, I feel like I interact with a lot of people in my day-to-day type of work and the way that I live. It's different than probably what you're experiencing. And I think the more variety and extreme different circumstances we put ourselves in life is what gives us that wisdom and knowledge to, it doesn't change our years from birth, but it changes our perspectives and amount that we've taken in, I think, kind of rapidly in these times. So you're not growing older. You're like, if you cut off a tree, we saw the 2,000-year-old olive tree today, you can measure how long it's been around. So I don't know that we can ever measure that in someone based on their experience, but I see your experience that you're getting now giving you a vast amount of wisdom in ways that you couldn't have imagined. You're now receiving, and then I can put that to use in other ways that even when I look at my life, when I've been at a certain job for so many years, yes, I'm learning more, but am I learning as much as I can in that time if I did something totally different? And sometimes I fear, no, that time could have been used much differently, perhaps much better in other ways. And I think traveling, the long journey back to this point, traveling is a way to aid yourself with wisdom much more quickly than a lot of other activities that I know that I've spent my time using, even though I travel quite a bit compared to other people. But sometimes if you're just kind of doing the same thing, getting a routine, I don't know how much you can really take in. But meanwhile, 8 months of you in Europe, I can't imagine all the things you've taken in.
I want to play devil's advocate.
Okay, do it.
And say that hopefully true mindfulness and being present and learning as much as you can with what you're given can be done in any circumstance. And there's no way I could ever know what an old fisherman who has been fishing in the same spot for 20 years could ever know. I could never know their experience because they are the only one that's living it. And I think that's true for everyone, that the experience you are having is so unique to yourself, and that's such a treasure. No matter what is happening in life around you, or your history, or the way your brain is working, if it's being mean to you, if it's being super nice to you, if it's beating you up about that thing you said or not. In every single moment, your experience of being alive and existing is so unique and is the only one that exists. And that's super cool. And there's an infinite amount of wisdom to be gained from that moment, no matter where you are or what you're doing. I believe.
So if this was a car driving through Bulgaria, was it Bulgaria?
Bulgaria.
If this is a car driving through Bulgaria, I would have been the person pointing out all the negatives going around. And you're the person pointing out the beauty in it all. Because I'm being judgmental towards myself in ways that I feel like I've misused time. Because I feel like I get more value traveling than my normal routine, which I think has its value. But traveling has just done wonders for me, I think. And then by projecting that on a previous version of myself and the way that I use my time, I'm then also projecting that on other people and on the way they use their time, which is not the right way to do it. So I like your perspective better. I will try to improve on taking some influence from that and hope that your influence is shared or is taken in beyond just me, because I really think your wisdom, even though that might have not come from your travel, is really worth considering, and that's a great perspective to have on time and what we learn and what we know and how we're using our moments, because I think I'm too judgmental on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Some words that came to me at one point were that there's no wrong way to exist, and I try to remind myself that, because sometimes I find myself doing a similar thought pattern where it's like, why aren't you just doing this thing that is perfect for me? In this moment, I believe that the way I'm living my life and traveling and changing what I'm doing as soon as it feels right, I can leave any of these work exchange opportunities whenever I want with very little consequence. And I did save up enough money where I can go stay in a cheap hostel for a few nights and then regather and change. And everything I own is in a backpack and a guitar.
Which I think, I don't know where the video is framed exactly. I think it's in the video behind you. Yeah, you're an artist. There's so much. I feel like we could talk for a long time, but for the sake of the battery on my recording device, for the others sharing this Airbnb, and in respect for eventually people watching and listening probably have other ways they want to use their time. I hope that they've enjoyed this as much as I have. Let's get to my two segments that I end most episodes with.
Segments. It's segment time with Curt.
I'm going to clip that out and use that in every episode from now on, maybe. I can't say for sure. You're going to see how it sounds.
Okay.
The personal growth segment.
Yes.
I feel like you are very aware of your growth and non-growth in certain ways, and a part of being introspective and continuing to learn. Is there a story, perhaps one you haven't shared yet during this conversation, that you think indicates a lesson in personal growth for you?
Okay. You asked me these at the beginning to try and keep them in mind.
Yeah, I tend to prompt my guests on these in some way to make sure that I'm not totally putting someone on the spot. But if we are, we'll work through it. No big deal.
Nice. That's a very comforting statement. Thank you. I guess the one that is coming to mind is just... okay. The biggest contributor to how I'm finding and feeling my own growth is by meditation and yoga to another extent, but that's physical and mental, and I try to find a good balance there. And I really like Sam Harris, and Sam Harris's Waking Up app is the one that I use the most. I meditate by myself very often also, but I've found a lot of guidance with this type of Vipassana present meditation. It is practicing 10 minutes a day or more to be as present as possible while sitting in silence. Usually silence, or not. Just sitting and being, and trying to observe all of the sensations. And that's all, without judgment. And some of the sensations are thoughts. Some of them are body, physical. A lot of them are environment. But all of them are arising in consciousness, and it's fascinating to watch them. It's impossible, hypothetically impossible, to be bored. I still am finding myself being like, oh, I'm bored sometimes if I'm on a long train or something and I've listened to a bunch of podcasts or something like that. But when your mind is this infinite well of conscious experience, we don't know very much about consciousness, but the best way to learn more about it is by looking, by observing, and we have it. It's here. I don't know where it is. I can't point to it, but it's here, maybe. It's this and this and this and everything, and very hard to word, but it has been the biggest contributor to my personal growth.
Meditation is something I've spent not much time on. I was going to say not enough, too little. That would be very judgmental towards myself. Huge fan of Sam Harris also. I listened to every one of his podcasts going back a few years.
Great.
And I began contributing to his podcast early enough that I got that app for free, the subscription, whatever. I'm already contributing money every month, a little bit, just a little bit. But I know it's a paid app. Not that, it's still not very, how expensive it is for one person, it varies. But then again, what I love about this guy, and there may be differing opinions, I don't know, but the one thing is he charges for his podcast and for his app. But if you email and say, I can't afford it, they'll take your word for it.
No questions.
And they'll give it to you for free.
Yep.
Which is the way that I wish everything was done.
Yeah, it's like, information exchange.
I appreciate the work you're doing, person. Yeah. I'm going to give you some money. Mm-hmm. Or I want to use what you're doing, person. I can't afford it, or I'm not going to pay for it. I'm like, okay, take it. Mm-hmm. But it's the idea that we can see someone doing something of value, and we can offer what we think it's worth to us, and that person can just accept it. Yeah. And someday, if I ever do anything with my podcast to generate some income, that is the model I will use.
Nice.
If anyone's willing to give me money.
Yeah.
If someone emails me now and says they want to give me money, then I probably should do it soon. But in the meantime, I have no urgency on that. I just want to keep doing better and having better conversations. And then at some point, I would do that. But that's the way it is. I'm doing this because I think there's value. And if someone wants to, at some point, give me some money so my time is used in a way that I can do more of it, great. But that's what he does. Because he wants to focus on that as much as he can and help people in these ways that he thinks he can help. And if he can make an income based on what people want to give him, he's going to be able to keep doing it. And that's beautiful. Yeah. And I'm so glad with this. We have more to talk about that.
Yeah, you got to do the meditation app.
Yes.
You got to check it out.
Okay.
It's super impactful.
Okay, well, I think I'm convinced now. The Being Wrong segment.
Being Wrong segment.
Wrong. I titled it that because I don't look at it necessarily in the way that, we've already had this conversation, that at any given moment, the choice that we're making is the only choice that we could have made.
Maybe.
So we're never really wrong. But what we can do is we can look at the former version of ourselves and think, if I right now were to make decisions for the former version of myself, which ones do I think that person did wrong? And maybe which is like one of the biggest ones that the former version of myself, now meaning the former version of yourself, was wrong about, that you're now very aware of, and you think sharing the story could be useful. Poof! Look at that magic trick. I feel like I'm Superman. Okay. That is amazing. You're a magician, aren't you? Let's get to the Being Wrong segment. Being wrong, it's somewhat about being wrong, maybe more about changing your mind on something from the past. So as you look at the former version of yourself, what is something from your life that you've changed your mind about, doing, acting, something that you feel like could be an important story to share? Yeah.
I think my answer for this one is that, well, slightly related to just relationships, and how in a couple experiences during this travel adventure that I've had, someone has joined me. One time it was my younger brother, who was 14, and another time it was this love of mine, Ro, and most recently, it has been you and my dad,
Mm-hmm.
which is slightly different because it's kind of a group setting. But each time I have learned more about what it means to reconnect with someone. And the first one was the hardest. It was with my little brother, who is 14. And we were both completely new people again when we met each other, which we talked about a little bit. And I and he seemingly expected our relationship to just pick up where it was before, and it's pretty easy, and we're going to go forward and have a great time. But I think neither of us totally expected to have trouble adjusting to the new people that we were. And I experienced that again with Roe when they came and joined me. And in each of these experiences, it took this adjustment period of meeting this person again. Even if it's my brother, who I've known for his whole life, or Roe, who I've known for a long time and been very close with for a long time, these new moments of meeting each other, it was difficult and took some time to adjust to who this person was. And with my brother, he doesn't know that. He hasn't experienced these type of strange, complex situations before. I hadn't really experienced this situation before, and I would have liked to have been more prepared for that, I suppose. Maybe set aside some time to talk with him, see what his expectations were for our trip, things like that. I learned a lot from it, and I'm very thankful for him being the cool kid he is. We had an adjustment period when we actually parted, where we didn't talk for about a month, and then since then we've talked about our experience, and now we're talking much more and have grown closer because of the experience itself. But in the beginning, we were like bickering like brother and sister, which we had really not done.
But you are.
But we are. Yeah, we had always gotten along really, really well. Mm-hmm. And at one point he like threw his phone, and I was like taking his phone, and he wasn't doing school, and we just got in these silly little arguments. I think because we didn't understand where the other person was coming from completely, which is something I try to be good at. But at that point, I was trying to approach someone that existed in the past in my mind, and I wasn't viewing him as this present person. So I think if I was there as the person I am now, I would want to be a little more present with him and give space for that adjustment time and feeling each other out.
You were wrong for having expectations that things should go a certain way based on this new version of yourself and this idea of this former person that you're close with joining you on this big adventure, and clearly these expectations were set at a bar that weren't realistic.
Yeah, good words.
Excellent. Remember earlier in the conversation when I thought I forgot about something? I remembered it.
Wow.
Briefly. We're in Crete.
Yeah, we are.
Island, south of Greece. Your dad and I flew here.
Yes.
Ro and you took a ferry.
Oh my gosh, yes, we did.
I would have taken a ferry if the timing would have made more sense. They didn't really. And I have 2 weeks, and I'm trying to use it as best I can most of the time. We flew. You could have taken the flight with us. Financially, your dad made an offer that seemed to be too good to refuse to me. You still didn't. Explain why you would take a ferry and not a plane if it wasn't if you had both options.
Yeah, good question. The biggest reason is because of the planet and how heavy air travel is on carbon emissions. And if I have the option to take a boat somewhere instead of flying, I would rather do that. I'm really trying to minimize my air travel. I've seen over and over how much pollution it produces, which makes sense. It's a big, heavy thing with a bunch of heavy people and heavy suitcases propelling itself into the air with carbon, essentially, and then flying around in the air with carbon. And it's not great for our planet. Another reason is because with this long-term travel, I generally am viewing the time that I'm spending as all being very valuable, and time spent on a 10-hour boat ride, ferry ride across the sea, is just as valuable as a morning or an evening in a place to me. So that experience is one I'm not going to forget, and one I'm going to be very prepared for when we take it back to Athens.
You learned from it,
and I get to do it again. And I'm going to do it again. Yeah, it was really fun because we went in and we didn't really know what to do with our tickets. We had a whole adventure trying to find these tickets. We had to switch them a bunch of times and go to a bunch of different ports. And we got on the boat. We followed the signs to reception, and we're like, "Hello, we have not done this before. Here's our ticket." And they said, "You don't have a cabin." We said, "No, we didn't buy a cabin." And they said, "Okay." And we were like, "All right, what do we do?" And they said, "Go around, find somewhere to sit." And we walked around for a while and realized that the way that this ferry was set up was people would just walk around on the ferry and throw blankets and sleeping bags in a spot on the floor or under the stairs or in a hallway, and that was where they were going to sleep overnight, because this was an overnight ferry. Or people would go into the cafe, dining hall type area and put their pillow and their bag and their caged bird and their rabbit and whatever else was with them. There was a lot of strange things here.
Cows and horses?
No cows, okay. No cows. No horses either. And then they would sleep, because the cheapest tickets are the ones that don't give you a cabin. You just are allowed to be on the boat. And so we found a little hallway and followed what everyone else was doing and put our stuff down. And eventually I slept on the floor after getting some fancy wine with Ro and playing backgammon. It was a lovely trip, but totally new and an experience that I'm really glad I had.
Lovely trip, and now your expectations will be different in a way that we've probably enjoyed even that much more on the way back, because you learned a few things.
Yeah, like most things.
Wonderful. Yeah. Mariah, Mas, thank you for your time with all this. Shortly, I won't be seeing you for a while, but I do intend to see you again and spend some more time with you and continue our conversations in the future.
Beautiful. Thank you, Curt.
Yay, podcast.